Hi everyone and welcome to the Millennial Revolt. Today we are going to be talking about Marine Le Pen, the French presidential elections, and what this means for France as a whole. So there's so much to talk about, so much to get into, so let's just jump right into it. So today the first round of French presidential elections were held and two people came out on top, Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen. François Fillon had been defeated, as well as the far-left candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon. Now we already see establishment parties urging their supporters to vote for Macron to keep Marine Le Pen and Front National from power. Jean-Luc Mélenchon, however, has not urged his supporters to vote for Emmanuel Macron and told them basically to do what they feel is right. Jean-Luc was also the anti-establishment, anti-EU candidate, only on the left. Now, given the history of the French presidential elections, usually the far-right candidates are shut out from the second round, and given the electoral arithmetic, it seems as if Emmanuel Macron does have a pretty good chance of becoming the next president of France if the polls are correct. Now, former President Obama as well as German Chancellor Angela Merkel have all called to express their support and backed his candidacy. Macron, that is. Given the elections in the US, the rejection of President Obama's policies for the last 8 years, and the toxic aura that surrounds Angela Merkel, mainly for her unilateral decisions of inviting millions of economic migrants to Germany while throwing the whole continent into chaos in the process, I would think that any support from these two would be a net negative and not a positive. So the takeaway from this round of the elections is the pro-EU candidate, Emmanuel Macron, in his first run for office, and Marine Le Pen, who succeeded in detoxifying her anti-immigrant party enough to make it to the second round, similar to what her father did back in 2002. The runoff campaign is in about 2 weeks and will feature a stark contrast between Macron's pro-EU, pro-globalization worldview and Le Pen's pro-sovereignty, pro-national identity worldview. Polls have shown Macron winning handily in a competition between the two, but given the way polls have been constantly wrong in the US, as well as in the Brexit referendum, they could be wrong here as well. Now, another takeaway from the first round is that the euro had jumped to 2% against both the dollar and the yen, as investors priced a win for Macron and the so-called receding threat of the far right and the far left candidates winning the presidency. Macron has vowed to reinforce France's commitment to the EU and the euro. Now, here's my thing for anyone who wants to vote for Macron. I understand that people do not like Marine Le Pen for various reasons. Her policies, they don't like her party, they don't like what she stands for. I get that. But the euro is a failing currency, and the EU is failing as well. There's so much disagreement, mainly with the immigration, mainly with sanctions on multiple countries, what's happening to Europe, what's happening to Southern Europe as far as Greece is concerned. There's so much going on, and there is no consensus between the bloc, and France is hurting as well. And to continue to commit to a dying union just shows that the elites in a lot of these countries do not understand what their constituents, the people of these nations, are going through. So it's really important that people really look at the issues going into the second round of this election, because I truly believe that if France doesn't get on the right course, and it could be Marine Le Pen and it could be somebody else, you never know, but if they don't start looking out for themselves, get a hold on their immigration policy, do something about what's going on in their country, they won't have what we know as France in the future. You know, the French culture of liberty, secularism, that sort of laissez-faire attitude, live and let live attitude. They might not have that anymore. And I think the people who are rioting, the people who don't like what she's saying, really has to take a hard look at what's happening in their country. Because even people who don't live there can see that there is something wrong. going on in France. I think Marine needed to actually win the first round to give her momentum going into the second. Even though the results are close, it's going to be a tough battle for her. I would have liked to see either Francois Fillon or Jean-Luc Mélenchon. Even though he is borderline and communist, I still would have liked to see either the so-called far-right, so-called far-left candidates battling it out. And even Fillon, some of his policies I actually did like. She does extremely well with the younger generation, but falls flat with 60 and older. And she doesn't do well in the cities either. And if we look at past elections for any clue of what may happen in the next 2 weeks, Macron is favored to win. Now, what we could see happen with the older generation, similar to what happened in Brexit, is that they voted heavily for nationalism, for sovereignty. This could also happen in 2 weeks, but given the fact that Macron is the centrist, they could just fall for him and go vote for him. Now, Le Pen wants to completely renegotiate France's relationship with Brussels, while Macron wants closer ties to the bloc. According to France's Interior Ministry, 46 million people voted in the first round of elections, which has knocked the traditional right and left parties out of the running for the first time in 60 years. Macron received 23.8% of the votes, followed by Le Pen with 21.5%. More than 50,000 police and men-at-arms were deployed to 66,000 polling stations for Sunday's election, which comes after Thursday's deadly attack at the Champs-Élysées, in which a police officer and a gunman were slain. However, initial election results triggered riots across the country, initially sparked in Paris's Place de la Bastille, the birthplace of the French Revolution, against Marine Le Pen's National Front. The crowds of young people, some of them anarchists and anti-fascist groups, gathered in eastern Paris as results were coming in from Sunday's first-round voting. Police fired tear gas to disperse an increasingly rowdy crowd. Riot police surrounded the area. Protesters had greeted several of Le Pen's campaigning events, angry at her anti-immigration policies and at her party. So it's going to be interesting to see what will happen in the next 2 weeks. If Macron will win and everything will stay the same, there will be no change in France, or Marine Le Pen will win and there will be a radical change in France. I think for the better. I may not like all of what she stands for, but I do think that France needs a radical shift in its policies, because I don't think for the country to survive, it can't keep going the way it's going. So I'm the Millennial Revolt. Thank you guys so much for watching, and you have a wonderful day. Bye.